Hey guys, so today I'm going to be making Tater Tot Casserole as promised. Casseroles have kind of gotten a bad name over the few years from people in the food service industry because they're particularly done with condensed soups, which is okay, you know, if you're a working class mom or you have a bunch of kids and you got a busy life, that's cool. However, I'm going to show you how to do it from scratch today by making the condensed soup and making all the ingredients that you want. There's actually a lot of culinary technique involved in this. I'm going to be building a soup up and then reducing it. I'll be using a roux and making a velouté, if you will. So let's have fun, and I will see you in a little while. Alright, so to make this, we're going to need two basic ingredients. I have a bag of Ore-Ida onion tater tots. Any type of tater tot will do. You can buy a generic off-brand if you'd like. You can buy them in bulk and save them for a snack later, but this is definitely a main component of the dish. Also, we're going to need ground beef. Typically, I would use ground beef, as I just said, but I sent Dan to the grocery store last night and he bought buffalo home. So this is a little leaner, it's a little healthier. I'm going to be using the chicken stock that we made, so you can also use ground chicken. That'll complement that dish with the stock very well. So first step in this is to brown your ground beef. As I said, I'm using a ground buffalo today, so it's a little bit of a leaner protein, so I'm just going to cook this off, pull it out into a separate bowl, melt a little more butter in there because I am going to be building a soup with this and letting it thicken up. So my ground buffalo has been browned up. As I've mentioned, this is a leaner protein, unlike ground beef. So I'm melting a little bit of a tablespoon of butter in there to give a little bit of extra fat. I'm going to be building a soup, so I'm going to start by building a roux. My next step is I'm going to add in my vegetables. If you see those brown bits in the pan, that's a good thing. That's what we're going to use to build our fond. Typically I would cook using a non-stick skillet, but today I'm using an enamel pot to build that in. Next up, now that the butter's melted, I'm going to throw my carrots, onions, and shallots in there. Typically I would have celery in there as well. Unfortunately, we don't have celery. I didn't make a list for Dan when he went to the grocery store, but I'm just going to let those cook or sweat and get nice and translucent. And then I'm going to add maybe a quarter cup of wine to deglaze the pan. That's what's called when we get that fond up. That fond is actually packed full of flavor and goodness, so you really kind of want that when you're building your soup. Alright, so I've been sweating my onions, carrots, and shallots for about 5 to 10 minutes. What I mean when I say sweating is I'm just cooking them, getting them soft. The onions should look a little translucent or a little cooked down. I'm not quite there, but I'm pretty happy with the consistency of this. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using a process to get rid of any of the stuck-on bits that are in there from cooking the ground beef. There's some right there, called deglazing. I'm going to be using about a quarter cup of wine to do this. I did have to crank the heat up just slightly, ever so much. And that's going to not only add the flavor from the wine, but it's also going to help get any of the stuck-on bits, as I mentioned, out of the pan. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to cook that wine down. I'm going to take it to a term that's called au sec. That's basically just reducing something until it's got, I guess the best way I can put it is a nice peanut butter consistency looking. That's a really bad idea. Don't quote me on that. Au sec is just basically reducing something down so that the basics of the liquids are gone, but the flavor is still there. This is going to cook all the alcohol out. True story. Alright, important life lesson learned. Never delete your video footage, because I accidentally deleted some important footage from making this. So what I did after I got the wine down to au sec was I added in about a handful of mushrooms, or 1 cup. It's really important that when you're doing that I added the mushrooms in last, because mushrooms add their own liquid in, and I was trying to get everything cooked down. So after I did that, I added in about a cup, maybe 2 cups of frozen corn and frozen green beans that I had defrosted. Then I added in the ground beef, and that's where we go from there. In the first part of the video I mentioned that we were going to be building a soup, and everything's been cooking together for a while, but now we're going to start to really build that soup. So to do that, I'm going to be adding 1/3 cup of flour to combine with the butter and all the other stuff that's in there. I'm going to stir this together, and this is going to build a roux around all the ingredients. You can make your own roux if you want. This is probably a more proper and traditional way to do it. I don't really like building a separate roux and then adding things in. Okay, so all the flour's been cooked together, and I don't know if you can see it very well, but the ground beef actually looks a little pasty right now. That's because the flour's in there. Don't worry about that flour taste. I've let it cook a little while so it incorporates in. The next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding all of my stock, so about 3 cups. If you're in a rush to do this, I would recommend starting with less liquid because I am going to let this cook down and reduce for quite some time. And I'll show you what this looks like once everything has been incorporated and how the butter and the flour will come together to build a thicker soup. Alright, so I brought my soup up to a boil. I reduced it down to a simmer. It's still in the process of doing that. But as you can see, as it cooked, the liquid got a little white instead of being translucent, and it's actually a thicker soup. So I'm going to let this simmer for a while and reduce to get it even more concentrated. I've added all my stock. I cooked my stock last Sunday, so it's the last day it needs to go. I don't like to hold food longer than 7 days to prevent bacteria growth. But I'm just going to stir this up, stir it every few hours, taste it as I go, let it season, let this thicken up, and I'll see you guys in a few hours. So I've had a few hours to reduce everything down. As you can see, I've got a nice mixture in here. I've been stirring it every so often, tasting it to see how the flavor has developed. It's got a good flavor on it. So my next step is, because as you know, with most condensed soups, there is a cream base in it. So I'm going to add a little bit of milk in, stir that in, and then melt some cheese in there. So I'm just going to stir a little bit of milk in. I could have done this earlier. However, I was afraid that the milk would curdle once it was mixed in. I'm going to stir that in, and then I'm going to add some cheese in and melt that down. Just going to sprinkle this cheese in, and whoa, if I don't knock the spoon out with my free hand. I'm going to let that all melt together, and while that's going, I'm going to get the base of the pan ready, and I'll show you guys that in just seconds once this is all stirred together. So the next part, while that's all cooking together, is to combine the last 2 ingredients. I have my bag of tater tots. I've got a nice square baking dish here. I typically make enough for a lot of people, so I use the rectangle baking dish, a 9x13, but today I'm using a 9x9 dish. Just because I don't want to have a lot left over. So I'm just going to dump some tater tots in, making a nice single layer. I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees. Pulled my pot off. This has been on a low heat, so if you're doing this straight from like a high heat, definitely make sure that you grab this with oven mitts. As you can see, I have my bare hands grabbing it, so I'm going to dump that in over what we already have baked. Going to dump the rest of my tater tots over. If you have a bigger bag, you might want to set some aside for later. And I'm going to make a nice other little single layer in there. Alright, so then I'm going to cover it with a piece of foil and put it in the oven for 1 hour at 350 degrees. At which point I will pull the foil off, put a little more cheese on top, and a little paprika, because, I don't know, a lot of these recipes you sprinkle paprika on things, and I kind of like it. Alright, so it's been about an hour right now. I've pulled it out of the oven. It's a little soupy. So what I've done is I've gone ahead, so when I put it back in there, I don't know if you can see it, but I put a pan in there to collect the liquid so it doesn't spill onto the floor. Now I'm going to sprinkle a little bit more cheese on there. This is just simple like a Monterey Jack Colby blend cheese that I grated, and then I'm going to put a little bit of paprika on top for a little color and a little flavor, not too much, and I'm going to put it back in the oven for about a half an hour. Alright, so that is my ode to the Tater Tot Casserole. I've been watching Glee reruns all afternoon, so I feel like singing a little as I say it. Stay tuned. On Wednesday, I'm going to be making a strawberry cream cheese mousse. My friend Ingrid from college actually said I should do these stuffed strawberries with cream cheese in them. However, strawberries are out of season, and mine are a little small, so I'm going to do the same thing with the same ingredients, only make a mousse, which is super fun, super easy dessert. You can do it on the fly in half an hour. Talk to you later. Bye.